History is full of amazing stories and memorable people.
But we don't care about them.
No hits, deep tracks only.
Some of the most influential people in the world have been completely overlooked or just plain forgotten.
We're digging deep into the history books to bring you their stories.
And maybe some laughs along the way.
This is History's B-Side. Today's B-Sider is the first person to circumnavigate the globe.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Phil.
Are you gelling?
I don't know how to answer that, Phil.
Do you remember those old Dr. Scholl's commercials?
Oh, yeah. I thought it sounded familiar.
Are you gelling?
Are you gelling?
I'm so gelling. I'm gelling like a felon. Have some melon.
We've lost 80% of the listenership on this episode.
I remember one of them where they were like, "Oh, I'm so gelling. I'm so gelling. I'm Magellan."
Is that your intro to Magellan?
Yes, we're here to talk today about Magellan.
For anybody wondering, we are both gelling.
We are so gelling. Gelling like a felon. Have some melon. So Magellan, obviously famous for being the first person to circumnavigate the globe, or at least leading the expedition to circumnavigate the globe, which is a long trip.
Yeah.
What's the longest trip you've ever taken?
By car?
Road trip, flight, international voyage around the world, you know.
The longest road trip I've taken was from Ohio to Yellowstone and back. The longest flight would probably be to Italy.
Well, you just drove from Portland to Youngstown.
Oh, that's true. I don't really count as a road trip because it's moving. So I guess, yeah. I mean, if we're counting just blindly driving for 3 days straight,
I mean, I don't think Magellan was traveling for joy.
That's fair. Yeah, then I guess Portland would be the longest. It's about a 36-hour drive.
I mean,
although, you know what? I got to tell you, I think to Yellowstone and back would be longer.
Yeah, I guess that's true if you're counting both ways.
Yeah.
Reed and I just drove down to Western North Carolina with Odie, and while that isn't particularly a long drive, you've been in the car with Odie,
yes,
and
I have.
You know that that's a long drive.
I drove Barley home from Portland. I don't know that I could have done it with Odie.
Odie is not very good in the car. We actually bonded. You and I became best friends on a long road trip on one of our
Disney World
high school band trips where we were forced to spend the night together on a bus.
High school marching band. I'm resisting making this one time at band camp joke, but
we were not very cool in high school, and doing a history podcast, we probably haven't gotten much cooler.
You know what? We're just owning it now.
Probably the longest, most grueling trip that I've taken as far as travel, like specifically travel-wise.
It was terrible.
When the trip was fantastic, but the travel was a little rough when Reed and I went to Athens.
Oh.
Because
I thought you were talking about the Disney trip.
That was pretty bad. I
just remember waking up in a Walmart parking lot at like 3 a.m. looking out a bus window feeling like I was on 8 different drugs and not knowing where I was.
Good. I'm glad neither of us slept on that trip.
Oh my God. I woke up at one point and there was gum in my hair and on my backpack, and I had no idea where it came from or whose it was.
High school was great.
Yeah.
When Reed and I went to Athens, we had 3 flights each way, there and back. So 6 flights in total.
That's insane.
5 of them got delayed. Not like horribly, but like an hour or 2. And the last one got completely canceled, and we got stuck in Toronto for a night.
Fantastic.
It was a fun trip, but the travel was a little bit rough. But none of that compares to the difficulty that it would take to circumnavigate the globe by any means.
I'd like to do that by kayak someday.
Kayak would be difficult. And we'll talk about some people that had some similar challenging circumnavigations, I guess. So obviously Magellan, who we started out talking a little bit about, is famous for his first expedition to circumnavigate the globe. Mm-hmm. But before we get into that whole big story, let's talk about some other famous circumnavigations. Obviously, the term circumnavigation meaning just encircling the globe, going all the way around. One of the more well-known ones is someone that I almost brought up on our pirate episode which was Sir Francis Drake, who, while he's not called a pirate because he kind of was more noble in the sense, I
Yeah.
guess, he was called a privateer, which is essentially a private for hire. But he was the first English circumnavigator, and his expedition was claimed to be for discovery and exploration, but really it just involved covert raids in an attempt to challenge Spain's global domination at the time.
Sounds about right.
The first French circumnavigation was commanded by a man named Louis de Bougainville, and on board was Jean Barret, who is a woman disguised as a man because women were not able to be on these expeditions at the time.
Interesting.
And this, in effect, made her the first woman to circumnavigate the globe.
She's like a French Mulan.
Pretty much. Sort of like, who did we talk about in American Revolution? Deborah Sampson.
Yeah.
So a common theme, these women dressing up as men to accomplish these feats that they weren't allowed to do. Also, apologies for all the names and pronunciations that we're about to get into in this episode.
Neither one of us are French.
Or Spanish or Portuguese or...
I'm a little bit Portuguese.
Are you really?
It's only like 5%,
Oh, well, that doesn't count.
but it's not enough
You
to
can't
speak it.
claim that.
I feel like I can claim it.
Another famous circumnavigation was actually Charles Darwin, who was aboard the HMS Beagle, which was captained by Robert Fitzroy, and that, of course, was in 1831 through 1836. Nellie Bly is another famous one. She was an American journalist who actually circumnavigated the globe in 72 days. That's all we're going to talk about her for now because she's going to come up on a future episode of History's B-Side. And Joshua Slocum, who was Nova Scotia born but a U.S. citizen, did it in very late 1800s, 1895 to 1898. What's interesting about this one is it was the first single-handed circumnavigation, which means he did it by himself.
Do you know what kind of boat he used? I assume you would need a much smaller boat for one man to operate.
Yeah, it was essentially a 36-foot called an oyster sloop, but it's really, if you look at pictures of it, just kind of looks like what you would picture as a standard sailboat.
Okay.
Really nothing too fancy, but small enough that he could have done it by himself.
Not the Black Pearl.
No, not Jack Sparrow. Operation Sandblast was the first underwater circumnavigation. It was completed by the USS Triton, so a U.S. submarine. Another interesting one was a man named John Sanders, who completed 11 circumnavigations between the years 1970 and 2021. He's an Australian man who just completed his most recent circumnavigation on January 31st of this year. So he might not be done. He might still be going
Does
around.
he take like different routes, or is it all like he's
I don't know.
speeding around the globe?
I think that's just like you did it once, and it's either just a thing that you do, like, yeah, he's the circumnavigation guy, or like you're maybe trying to accomplish new feats with it, trying to go faster. I don't know.
He must really like sailing around the globe. I feel like it'd get old.
He's just trying to get away from his wife.
Oh man, poor Mrs. Sanders. My husband's been gone 40 years.
In a similar vein, there's a race. It's a single-handed, non-stop yacht race around the world called Vendée Globe, which is in its 9th year of running, and it actually just completed between January and March of this year. Well, it started in November, so the first people finished in January, and most recent ones in March. They had 25 people complete solo non-stop circumnavigations, and 2 more completed it with having to make stops. So
Interesting. So you're not automatically disqualified for stopping.
I guess not. I've never competed in this one.
What?
It's kind of crazy. Like, we talk about how, I mean, we're going to hear a lot in this episode about how difficult it is to sail around the globe.
Yeah.
And now we have 27 people who did it for fun this year.
Yeah, I mean it is pretty wild, just considering the kind of, I guess, solitude I feel like you'd end up feeling. Like,
Yeah, I
I
mean-
don't know how many people are like following them or camera crews or how public this is, but I don't know. I don't even like camping alone next to a car in like a state park. So to be on like a sailboat by myself in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with nobody around seems kind of crazy.
One thing I didn't look up that I probably should have is how many people start this race, because I don't know if that
finish.
means that they either just dropped out or something much worse happened to them. But
I hope nobody dies doing this. I mean, I'm sure it's not unheard of.
yeah, it's
but-
hard to imagine that everything goes smoothly. The youngest person to complete a single-handed circumnavigation was Laura Decker, a New Zealander who did it in 2011, 2012. She was 14 years old when she started and 16 when she finished.
Jesus. It's way more than I was doing at 14.
Where are her parents?
Adam probably on a sailboat out somewhere too.
Who's just letting their 14-year-old daughter go sail around the globe by herself?
I'd love to have heard that conversation.
The fastest to do it with a crew was a Frenchman named Francis Joyon, who had a crew of 5 sailors. They did it from December 2016 through January 2017.
Wow.
Completing it in 40 days, 23 hours, 30 minutes, and 30 seconds. So like a month and a half.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive. But probably more impressive is the fastest solo circumnavigation. Another Frenchman named Francois Gebard, who did it in November 2017 through December 2017 in only 42 days, 16 hours, 40 minutes, and 35 seconds.
You know he was trying to break their record.
Yeah, he's got
like
no
after
crew. And he did it in like a day and a half longer.
Yeah. You guys look dumb.
And like not that long after. I mean, it was
Yeah,
later
that
the
same
same
year.
year. And then I had to mention a couple human-powered circumnavigations because I know we're talking about sailing for the most part in this episode, but these two guys are psychos. Like, so a human-powered circumnavigation is a person who encircled the entire globe, either by sea or by land, using only human-powered vehicles, be it hiking or biking or rowboat or whatever. Like, this is no
Paddleboard.
high-level machinery or anything like that. These are just people who literally, for the fun of it, traveled all the way around the globe.
That's a lot. Who has that much time?
So the first one, and it took a long time. The first one was a man named Jason Lewis. He was an English author, and he started his journey in 1994. It took him over 13 years to complete his circumnavigation. He traveled with friends or supporters, people, I guess, kind of keep an eye on him to make sure everything was okay, or some of the people that helped build some of his man-powered vehicles. He traveled by mountain bike on land, and he traveled by pedal boat to get across the ocean. And this is interesting.
Pedal boat?
He was the first, and I have to imagine the only person to roller skate across the United States.
That actually kind of sounds terrifying. I can on flat land, I'd be down, but like, can you imagine coming down the Rockies on a pair of roller skates?
I don't know his exact route. Well, no, he had to have gone through the Rockies because I read that he actually was held up in, I think, Denver for a while because he got hit by a drunk driver while roller skating. Can you imagine? He lands in Florida, roller skates all the way to Denver to get hit by a drunk driver.
I'd be real upset.
So he roller skates all the way across America, eventually gets on this pedal boat type thing to pedal to Hawaii, eventually make his way all the way across the Pacific Ocean and down to Australia.
Are we talking about the things they have in Mill Creek Park where you literally sit there and pedal and there's a little paddle?
I didn't see a picture of it, but like not paddle, pedal.
Okay.
Like you're riding a bike, which, yes, like the things in Mill Creek Park. I can't imagine they look exactly like that. Like this thing has to be a little bit more durable and speed and easier to maneuver.
I have to know.
But I can't imagine it being a very easy journey to get across the Pacific Ocean. Once he's in Australia, he actually has to take some time off, and he's kind of stuck in Australia for a few years while he continues to fundraise and recover from injuries.
So this is why
from
it took
his
him
travels.
so long. He could have done it faster.
Yeah, oh yeah, he definitely gets tied up for a while, recovering from injuries. I'm pretty sure he gets sick at some points along the way, and basically runs out of money and has to find people to help kind of fund the rest of his journey back to England. So he gets out of Australia, pedals all the way over to Africa, and continues his journey hiking or whatever he needs to do to get all the way across Africa and back to his home country of England.
I was really desperate for a storyline as an author.
I mean,
some writer's block.
He made it back in 2007. He completed his journey. I think he's like a sustainability camper type thing. So he's very like eco-friendly. Matt would have loved him back in your prime.
I'm still in my prime, damn it.
So the other one, who's maybe even crazier, is a Turkish American by the name of Erden Uric, who Now, his was the first solo human-powered circumnavigation. So he did it all by himself, and he did it in only 5 years.
Dear God.
So really a more difficult challenge,
Yeah.
and did it way faster than the first guy, Jason Lewis. Erden traveled by rowboat, sea kayak, bicycle, and hiking. He made his journey all the way around, just depending on whatever kind of terrain he was trying to get across. He completed it in 5 years, and now since, once you're done circumnavigating the globe by
course.
yourself on only human-powered vehicles, you need a new challenge. He's working on summiting the tallest mountain in 6 continents, of which he's already completed 3.
God. I ran 1.5 miles 3 days ago, and I still can't walk.
I'm just like imagining where you get this idea. Like, I'm going to go do this. I thought a lot about, we've talked about Forrest Gump on our podcast before,
Yeah.
and I thought about Forrest Gump like running back and forth across the country, and you're like, this is a stupid joke. No one does this. No one could do this. And then you read about people
Yeah.
like this, and it's like, you're a psycho.
Well, it's just like, I don't know. I feel the same way about the Ironman triathlon, I guess. It's like you take a 26-mile race, the marathon, which is already like a stupidly long race.
Yeah.
And then you add 116 miles biking and a 3-mile swim before it. Or even the guy, like the ultra runners that run like 150-mile races. Like, what is that? It's not normal.
Who likes to do that? Like, okay, I don't like running. I can run. When I was running a half marathon with my mom, she got really
Yeah.
mad because she was training, and like I basically rolled out of bed and ran like an 11-mile like practice run with her. And like, don't get me wrong, I was hurting after, but
Yeah.
like I know she was really mad because like I know
You're,
I
like, half
could
her
be a
age,
distant
right?
runner. Oh yeah, I mean I was 24 or something like that, maybe 22, and she was obviously 30 years older than me. But like, I don't know, like I can't imagine being this guy who just wakes up and is like, I'm just gonna go circumnavigate the globe by
Yeah.
myself with only human powered vehicles.
Do we know how old these guys are? I feel like people who do this kind of stuff have to be like in it for a while. It's not the kind of sport where you end up doing it young, except for the 14-year-old that did it. So there you go.
Jason Lewis today is 53 years old. When he set out for his circumnavigation,
So he
let's see,
would've
he was
been
born in
40.
'67, so
When
he
got
was
back.
about not quite 30.
Yeah, he would have been 27-ish when he left, and then 40 when he returned. His whole 30s. The dude was like, screw my 30s. I'm walking and rowing around the world. Pedaling around the world.
And Erden Urich was, well, he's 59 now, so he's about the same age. Who probably would have been around.
So he was older.
So he would
was
have
like
been
46.
like 45 or 46 when he set out on his journey. So that's really impressive.
Jeez, yeah.
So obviously we'll get back to our sailing circumnavigations. We'll talk about Magellan again. He's obviously credited with the first circumnavigation, and his voyage lasted from 1519 to 1522. So
Pretty speedy.
they sailed around the globe in 3 years. Unfortunately for, Ferdinand Magellan, he died in 1521, did not actually complete the voyage.
Magellan was not gelling.
He was not gelling. So when we talk about Magellan being the first person to circumnavigate the globe, it's really not accurate because Magellan himself didn't circumnavigate the globe.
Interesting.
His voyage was eventually completed by a man named Juan Sebastian Elcano. He's someone who's really not very well heard of, but Juan Sebastian Elcano was someone who was on the voyage from the start to the finish. He started out as sort of a second-tier officer and worked his way up to being the captain of the ship that finally did make it all the way around the globe. So we're going to talk about him today, talk about how he came to lead Magellan's expedition and why he's not really recognized in the way that Magellan is today.
Interesting.
We'll take a quick break, and then we'll get into the story of Juan Sebastian Elcano.
We'll be right back.
Matt, you like coffee, right?
I love coffee.
Would you ever want to buy me a coffee?
Anytime, Phil. Just say the word.
Our dedicated listeners could also buy me a coffee.
Could they buy me a coffee as well?
They could buy you a coffee.
This sounds fantastic.
We set up this service called Buy Me a Coffee at buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside.
And people can buy us a coffee?
Yeah, it's really just a way for people to support the show if they enjoy the show. And if they're listening to the show, we sure hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, otherwise you're just, wasting your time.
At buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside, there's 3 ways that our listeners can interact with the show. Number 1, you can just donate to the show by clicking Buy Them a Coffee.
2, you can join as a member for $10 a month or $100 a year. Being a member gains you some pretty cool perks. You get access to our monthly bonus episode, History's B-Side Battles, access to our future episode queue, a name shout-out on a future episode. We'll also send you a handwritten thank you postcard and sticker set, and more perks will be announced as we continue on.
There's also some different extras that people can get on our Buy Me a Coffee website. Things like choosing the topic for a future episode. If there's a lesser known person in history that you have an interest in, let us know and we'll do an episode all about them. You can also buy sets of custom postcards, sticker sets, and future merchandise that we add on there as well. Or you can draft your own advertisement script and we will promote whatever you want in a segment like this.
The website again is buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside.
Matt,
Yeah.
you owe me a coffee.
Oh. Do I get a coffee too?
You're buying.
All right.
Today we're talking about Juan Sebastian Elcano, who is the first person to circumnavigate the globe. He was born around 1436 in the coastal town of Guetaria in the Basque Country. Guetaria is it's on the northern coast of what is today known as Spain, and the Basque Country is located in the western end of the Pyrenees Mountains in north-central Spain and southwestern France. So it's technically a part of Spain, but the Basque Country itself is sort of they view themselves as an autonomous region that's not, they don't really view themselves as part of Spain, they view themselves as separate, although the land is technically a part of the country of Spain.
So they view themselves as separate from both France and Spain.
Yeah, they're kind of their own separate ethnic group,
Okay.
and they're very proud with their claim to their land.
Gotcha.
So we'll talk about the Basques a little bit because it is part of Elcano's background. The Basques, they're pretty much isolated from the other European cultures, especially from the early Middle Ages until the French Revolution in 1790. And that's really when Spain and France started to incorporate the Basque Country into their own political borders that we see today. So while their lands is divided between France and Spain, they still sort of maintain a little bit of their own autonomous communities that are in some ways self-governed.
Interesting.
The distinction between the French and Spanish, or the Basques, plays a role in the legacy of Juan Sebastian Elcano. But even today, the loss of the Basques' native institutions and territories and self-governance causes friction between them and France or Spain. And really, some elements of nationalism by all parties, everyone involved, has led to violence, both physical and cultural, between the Basques and the French and Spanish.
Have there been any recent conflicts due to this, or is this kind of like something that's in the past?
So the big one was actually called the Basque Conflict, and it
Absolutely.
was it was an armed political conflict between Spain and a lot of Basque nationalists and separationists, which lasted a pretty long time from 1959 through 2011.
Jeez.
It was mainly led by a violent group of Basque nationalists, which were called ETA, which stands for, I'm going to say this horribly wrong, Euskadi ta Askatasuna.
That was beautiful.
So
Good job.
ETA. And ETA has actually been classified as a terrorist organization by, at varying points, the Spanish, the French, the British, and even American authorities.
This is crazy. I know nothing about this.
It's kind of like the Bosnian War that we talked about.
Yeah,
There's like
what?
a huge thing going on in a small part of Europe that we're just, by our American biases, don't really know too much
Going on
about.
for 52 years.
I mean, it's not like a war, but it's definitely like
Just a series of-
political, some different political violences between the two groups.
Jeez.
Even actually, Basque nationalist groups condemn the violence of the ETA. Like they're just kind of this extremist
like the
group
extremists,
within
okay.
the Basque culture that was really fighting to establish the the independence of the Basque nation, the Basque culture from Spain or from
Yeah.
France. But the ETA, after all the whole conflict and everything kind of settled down a bit, the ETA was believed to have disbanded in 2018, and there, as far as I know, hasn't been too much more recent conflict than that.
Gotcha.
Although I'm sure there's still a lot of divide between the two,
Right.
the Basque country and Spain. And really, this historical schism between the Basques and the Spanish is relevant to why Elcano today isn't as widely known as Magellan. We'll get back into Elcano a little bit here. His parents were Domingo Sebastian Elcano and Catalina del Puerto. He had 3 brothers, Domingo Elcano, Martin Perez Elcano, and Anton Martin Elcano. Very similar names.
Yeah.
They were a pretty wealthy family. They made all their money in sea trading, so Juan Sebastian was pretty familiar to this type of career choice.
Sure.
He was kind of destined to be this sailor or this sea merchant. He had brief military experience. It's believed that he fought in the Italian wars under the command of Gonzalo Fernandez de Cordoba in Italy. And in 1509, he joined the Spanish expedition, which was organized by Cardinal Francisco Jimenez de Cisneros, which, if you're a loyal listener of History's B-Side, you'll recognize that name from the Bartolomé de las Casas episode.
Call back.
He was an ally of Bartolomé in his quest to defend the indigenous peoples in the Americas. But obviously, Juan Sebastian, different side of
Sure.
the country on this point, but was working alongside Cardinal Francisco Jimenez de Cisneros. After his military experience, he began his own career as the captain of a merchant ship and was working on behalf of the Spanish crown. However, his ship was funded by foreign creditors, I believe, in Genoa, and his repayment for his work from the Spanish crown was pretty delayed. He never really received the money he was entitled to for doing this work. So the creditors actually seized his ship and took it away from him, which, according to Spanish law at the time, was a crime for him to give up his ship to a foreign country. And
What?
that put
garbage.
Elcano
So
in
wait,
legal
let me get
jeopardy.
this straight. The Spanish crown didn't pay him, so he couldn't pay his debts. His ship got taken away, and then they charged him with a crime?
Pretty much. At least that's my interpretation of what I read on this.
Dear God.
So obviously facing this legal trouble, in January of 1519, he moves to Seville, Spain, hoping to get a pardon from Emperor Charles V. And
This is still so ridiculous.
as part of this pardon, he's assigned to serve as a bosun aboard the Victoria, which is a carrack, which is a ship. It's essentially what you would picture as the seafaring giant ships with the
Sure.
3 or 4 masts. And this ship, the Victoria, would later be a part of Magellan's expedition. A bosun is responsible for managing the staff of the ship, repairing or reconditioning the carrack. It's not as high ranking as, say, a master or a senior officer, like the commander or captain of a ship, but it's still, I don't know, a mid-tier type.
Yeah, it carries
Officer.
authority.
Right. And some responsibility. Now, because Elcano was so well connected in the merchant shipping industry, by March of 1519, he was promoted to be the master of the Concepcion, which is another carrack that would eventually serve in Magellan's expedition. And this made him responsible for hiring the crew, readying the ship, and planning the navigation for what would turn into Magellan's expedition.
Do you have any idea of what was involved with the readying of a ship for an expedition such as this? I mean, was it just your pretty standard?
My guess is kind of just any
Stocking.
necessary repairs, stocking it with supplies, hiring and training crew if necessary, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, it would just be making sure that the ship was ready to set out to sea on such a difficult and long voyage.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about Magellan, how he comes into this story, and kind of the whole purpose of the voyage that our buddy Elcano is eventually going to serve on. So because of explorers like Christopher Columbus reaching the Americas, the Spanish knew that the Americas were not the same continent as India. Their original plan there to go to find spices for the spice trade didn't really prove successful.
Mm-hmm.
And early Greek philosophers had already posited the idea of the earth being round, but a physical demonstration of this had not yet been proven. So for Europeans at the time, that they had this idea that the world was round and they could sail around it,
Yeah.
but they weren't really sure what was on the other side of the world beyond the Americas, which is kind of important to what's going to happen on this expedition. the Americas themselves, how big they were,
Right.
both across how far, if whether or not you could go across the Americas or if you could go all the way around it, was very unknown, especially when you got past it and got into the Pacific Ocean, or what they referred to as the Southern Ocean, because they just believed that once you got past the Americas, you would be in India.
Asia. Yeah.
Another thing to keep in mind is that in 1494 there was a treaty called the Treaty of Tordesillas, and what this did was establish the eastern sea routes, which were south of Europe down around Africa. All of those belonged to Portugal.
That alone, like, I've never heard of this, and reading this and hearing it is crazy. That I don't know what to compare it to. It almost feels like the United States being like, so we're the only ones that are going to use the Pacific Ocean for trade, and the rest of you can have the other way.
It really goes to show how Europe viewed its position in the world, like that Europe is the top tier and everything else is below it, undiscovered.
Right.
And so this treaty, it essentially divided the world outside of Europe, or the world as it was understood at the time, between Portugal and Spain, the two most prominent kingdoms at the time.
So England and France, they couldn't sail around Africa either?
I'm not really sure the answer to that, I guess. My understanding of it, and maybe this is me not being very well researched on the topic, is just that it was Portugal and Spain that were sponsoring most of the expeditions that were exploring the world.
Gotcha.
So they were the ones essentially claiming the land.
Okay.
Once France and England started to have their own sponsored explorations, they started to challenge Portugal and Spain for some of these territories. But specifically this Treaty of Tordesillas divided all of the world as it was known outside of Europe, with the east belonging to Portugal, the east being Africa and Asia, and the west being basically the Americas and the new undiscovered world to Spain. Now, because of the economic importance of the spice trade, the Spanish sought to develop a new commercial sea route to Asia, or the East Indies as it was known, via the west, through the trade routes that they were entitled to from this treaty.
Do you think they were like kind of pissed when they realized that like Portugal got the short route and there was a whole other ocean they had to cross for theirs?
I'm really curious if they even like knew that. Obviously, you discover it from this expedition, but I have to imagine that their understanding of the world at this time is not that great.
Right.
And they don't realize that they kind of got screwed on this deal.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems so ridiculous that any country, Spain, France, any of them, would agree to let Portugal take this entire, not even route, but direction of sailing.
You know, the globally dominating force that we know today of Portugal.
Right?
So obviously the Spanish knew how important the spice trade was, and they were trying to find these new commercial sea routes through the west. So they began commissioning expeditions to discover these new routes as early as 1505. A lot of these routes made it to what we know today as Central America or South America, even eventually crossing what's known today as the Isthmus of Panama, which is today where the Panama Canal is located. So they had explorers who were able to essentially cross over to the Pacific, or what they called the Southern Ocean, but they only viewed this as just a small body of water between the Americas, New World, and what they thought was Asia.
Yeah.
So enter a man named Ferdinand Magellan. Magellan was a Portuguese explorer with prior naval experience in Asia. He had a friend who might have even been a cousin who sent him letters from the Spice Islands telling him of their beauty and their richness. And this really motivated Magellan to plan an expedition and discover a trade route to the Spice Islands. The Spice Islands were also known as the Molucca Islands, or just the Moluccas, and today they're located in what we call modern-day eastern Indonesia. We refer to them also a lot as the East Indies because of just the understanding of the world at that time, that they were just in the relative east of India, so East Indies.
Right.
That's where all these spices like cloves and nutmeg and cinnamon, all that stuff was plentiful. And the European countries would try to claim them because they were just very valuable in a part of the world where they didn't have them. They couldn't grow them.
I'm a little surprised, just given, like, we're talking about the view of the world. I'm surprised nobody, like, went past Japan first, like, before they went around South America. You know what I mean? Like, maybe somebody did.
They went around South America?
Like, if we're saying that Spain didn't understand the size of the Pacific Ocean.
Like they reached Japan before getting down to.
No, what I'm saying, I guess, is that I'm surprised that people didn't discover the size of the Pacific Ocean from sailing east from Asia versus west from Europe around South America. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know if they made it
accurate.
that far. Like once they get to the Spice Islands, they probably just turn around and
Sure.
go back because
Yeah.
they don't want to venture to somewhere that they don't know once they have their
goods.
Yeah. So Magellan, wanting to find these new trade routes to the Spice Islands, begins petitioning King Manuel I of Portugal to sponsor his expedition, but he was repeatedly denied. He got pretty fed up with the king, so Magellan requested and was eventually granted approval to seek sponsorship from another country for his expedition. In 1517, he moves to Seville, Spain, and presents his idea to Emperor Charles V. Now, as we said, Spain was already looking to find a route like this via the west, and knowing that it wouldn't hurt their relations with Portugal, because, as we said, Magellan had permission from the Portugal king to seek this sponsorship,
Yeah.
the Emperor of Spain agreed to fund the expedition.
Bad move, Portugal. Maybe. I don't know if this even affected you.
The Spanish crown provided for the expedition 5 ships with enough supplies for up to 2 years of travel. Note that, as we said earlier, the expedition takes 3 years to complete, so that'll be important later on. Now, I thought this was interesting because everyone loves food. 80% of the food supplies that were brought on board consisted of 2 items: wine and hardtack. Hardtack being just a simple cracker made with flour and water, sometimes salt. It was long-lasting and used as sustenance in the absence of perishable food. So it's important to have aboard a ship, but also I thought that's a lot of wine.
I mean, I would take the wine. I don't even know if you can really call hardtack food. I've tried hardtack, and I'd almost rather, I don't know, starve than...
Where have you tried hardtack?
This is going to make me sound even cooler than the Marching Band in History podcast. But when I was younger, must have been in like middle school maybe, me and my dad did like a road trip through Civil War battlefields in like Virginia and Maryland and Pennsylvania. And they had a place that actually sold realistic hardtack. And it's pretty much as close to edible wood as you can get. It's like a saltine cracker, but I don't know, as hard as like rock candy.
You are really cool.
It's rough. Maybe if you dipped it in the wine, it'd be good.
In addition to the hardtack, they also carried flour, salted meat, livestock, which was just 7 cows and 3 pigs. They had cheese, almonds, mustard, and figs, which today we would call that charcuterie.
Right? This sounds great. Wine and charcuterie. Yeah. I feel like nowadays you could get some millennial Instagram influencers to work on the ship for free just to get that picture.
That's all Juan Sebastian Elcano was. He was a millennial influencer who just wanted to post on Instagram.
Baby, get the shot. Get the shot. Did you get the manchego? It looks really good.
So the 5 ships on the expedition carried a crew of 270 men. The 5 ships, which we'll mention throughout the episode because they have pretty different stories about how they made it around on the expedition, but they included the Trinidad, which was a flagship captained by Magellan, the Santiago, the Concepcion, the Victoria, and all 3 of those were those carracks that had the 3 or 4 masts, the big seafaring sailing ships that you would picture, and the Santiago, which is called a caravel, which is a smaller, highly maneuverable, essentially a sailboat.
Gotcha.
The crew was mostly Spanish. Magellan originally had his own Portuguese crew, but the emperor didn't fully trust him and replaced Magellan's crew with a crew full of Spaniards.
Not that surprising.
It still consisted of about 40 Portuguese, 29 Italian, 17 French, a small number of Flemish, Greek, Irish, English, Asian, and black sailors.
I'm surprised at how much they're mixed in.
Yeah.
I don't know why I have this concept of like French people are on the French boat. Italians are on the Italian boat.
Yeah, I think that is interesting about this age of exploration. Like, I feel like there's a lot of cultural diversity, I guess. And it's not really that diverse because they're mostly all European, but it still has a little bit of like people coming from other countries for the same goal, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it just surprises me. I have this idea of like the monarch governments being really strict and like hard to mix. I don't know. I guess I don't imagine them having open borders, but apparently they had some sort of...
Well, as we said, the majority of the crew was Spanish, which included at least 29 who were actually Basques, which was obviously included Juan Sebastian Elcano.
Sure.
On August 10th, 1519, the ships left Seville for Sanlúcar in southern Spain, where they finalized preparations for 5 weeks and then officially departed on September 20th, 1519. Now, Magellan, obviously, we discussed the Spanish ships have to sail to the west towards the Americas, but Magellan initially sailed south down along the African coast. He'd learned that the King of Portugal, who I guess changed his mind, had sent 2 fleets of caravels to arrest Magellan. So he was trying to stay more in Portuguese water so that he was, I guess, a native in his own area.
Yeah.
He was also warned of a potential mutiny, which was led by Juan de Cartagena, who was the captain of the San Antonio. And Cartagena disagreed on the route that Magellan was taking, mostly the fact that he was staying south along Africa.
Yeah.
And he really wanted the voyage to go more west because he was Spanish and wanted to sail in the Spanish waters. So there was a small attempted mutiny.
It seems so trivial. My waters, your waters, my waters.
There's actually a lot more backstory to this specific one. I don't want to get bogged down in all the
Sure.
details of the voyage because if you are really interested in the Magellan voyage, I encourage you to read further beyond our podcast. But the mutinies themselves are pretty interesting. But this was a small mutiny. It was pretty poorly planned. It was almost like spur of the moment. It was thwarted, and Cartagena was actually demoted from captaining the San Antonio. He wasn't killed. He was still aboard the crew, but he was no longer captain of the San Antonio. The crew does eventually cross the Atlantic. They arrive near Rio de Janeiro on December 13th, where they stay for 2 weeks to repair ships, restock supplies, and interact with the locals. This is...
He did air quotes around interact just so you can...
Let's make this the colorful part of the episode where the crew who had spent much time at sea already discovered that they could purchase certain favors from some of the local women in Rio de Janeiro. So you can imagine they hung out for a little bit in this area before getting back on board the ships to continue sailing along the eastern coast of South America. They were searching for a strait that they believed to exist.
And they sailed south from Rio de Janeiro,
Yes.
right?
Yep. So they're sailing south along the eastern coast of South America. Now, as weather conditions began to worsen, they had to take a break for 5 months and wait out the winter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, they're just kind of in this.
They found more locals.
They're not really in civilization at this point. They're at a natural existing port called St. Julian, but they broke here for about 5 months while they were waiting out the winter. And I kind of wonder, because they're pretty south right now,
Yeah.
if they were really waiting out the winter, because they broke right at the end of March. They broke on March 31st. And I wonder if they're really waiting out the winter or if they're just so close to Antarctica at this point that like everything is winter.
Yeah.
But so they take this break for what will eventually be 5 months. But the first night that they decided to land and wait out the winter, another mutiny happens.
Of course.
April 1st is Easter Sunday. This is April 1st of 1520. It's another mutiny coordinated by Cartagena along with the captains of the Concepcion and the Victoria. So in this mutiny, these 3 men actually also overtake the San Antonio and now have control of 3 ships. And they begin to threaten Magellan, who's aboard the Trinidad. But Magellan and his loyalists were able to infiltrate the 3 ships that had been captured by the mutineers and prevent this mutiny from succeeding.
I mean, that's pretty badass to be able to take the other 3 back.
Yeah, I mean, this is another look into it if you want to read more about these, because they're cool stories. We're just not here to focus on Magellan. But several of the mutineers, once Magellan is defended, several of the mutineers are put to death by beheading or they're drawn and quartered.
Pretty standard.
Cartagena himself was marooned, so he was basically just left to die in
Definitely
a
not
deserted
funny
area.
but you just don't hear about people being marooned.
In total, over 40 conspirators, which included Juan Sebastian Elcano, were put in chains and made to work hard labor. Probably the reason that Juan Sebastian Elcano wasn't murdered himself, or not murdered or killed himself, is because he had so much experience as a sea merchant. He was a very skilled navigator, and they knew that he would be important to the journey later on.
Yeah.
So after 5 months, the crew decides to continue onward. and they eventually discover what is today known as the Strait of Magellan, which is a pretty small passage near the southernmost tip of South America. So they've made it pretty far. I think they, at this point, thought that they would have, already been past South America.
Yeah.
They thought that they would have found the strait a little bit earlier on.
Like, oh my God, this thing is so long.
But they do eventually find this strait and are able to make it to the Pacific Ocean. Before they actually make it to the Pacific Ocean, though, they lose the Santiago, which was the small caravel, to wreckage. Meanwhile, the San Antonio gets separated as they go through the strait, and the crew aboard the San Antonio decides to essentially just desert and head back to Spain.
Just leave.
They're pretty much over it at this point. They're Spanish, so they don't like Magellan, and they go back to Spain and essentially destroy the legacy of Magellan locally. They talk about what a terrible captain he was and how badly he treated the crew, and they just say that, I believe they say that the rest of the ships got lost at sea, and that's why they turned around and came back home. So the San Antonio is now gone, the Santiago is destroyed, but the other three ships, the Trinidad, the Concepcion, and the Victoria, make it through the strait and are now in the Pacific Ocean. Now, Magellan, ever the optimist, believes that South America was only separated from India by a small sea. Like we said, they weren't really familiar about what was going on the other side of the world, and that their journey would only take another 2 to 3 days. It actually took them about 3.5 months.
Can you imagine, I guess this is akin to airline travel today, but can you imagine if an airline pilot came over the PA and informed you that a 9-hour transatlantic flight was actually going to take 9 days, let alone months? People would freak out. No wonder he had mutinies and people giving up.
I mean, I feel like at this point they're just invested and they're like,
well, yeah,
we're stuck on this ship. We're either going to die on the ship or we jump overboard, so we might as well just wait it out and hope that things work out. But yeah, I mean, obviously they didn't know what was going on the other side of the Americas, but I'm sure it's not what they expected. They didn't have adequate food or water on board anymore, and a lot of the crew was susceptible to scurvy. Out of the 166 men who actually made it to the Pacific, 19 of them died on this leg of the journey.
Jeez.
The crew arrives in Guam on March 6th, 1921.
Bet they were happy.
Here they gather some supplies, and then they travel to the Philippines, where they arrive on March 16th. In the Philippines, Magellan becomes very close with the locals. And he starts, I guess he kind of loses vision of what this mission was about.
Yeah, he seems to be confused.
He no longer is, I guess, seeking the spices. I mean, he still is seeking the spices, but he starts to do what a lot of other explorers at this time were doing, and that is converting the locals to Christianity. And he begins to participate fighting in their tribal warfare.
Was he fighting alongside them or as an ally or against them?
So Magellan became pretty close friends with the king of the Philippines, who converted to Christianity. He gave supplies to the Spanish ships and commanded that all of the surrounding islands do the same.
All right.
The king of the Philippines actually takes on the name Carlos, which is his, I guess, variant of King Charles V. But anyway, so the king of the Philippines commands the surrounding islands to also convert to Christianity and give supplies to the Spanish ships. And most of them comply with the exception of the island of Mactan. So Magellan, along with the king and a small army, invade the island of Mactan to attempt to force them to comply.
Great. That's just great.
It is in this invasion of the island of Mactan that Magellan is killed in the Battle of Mactan on April 27th.
It was ironic just desserts. He got distracted, took his eyes off the prize.
Like we said, Magellan did not make it all the way around the globe.
So close.
So
Not
close
really.
to reaching the
Not
main
really.
point of their journey. So now that Magellan is no longer with them, the crew holds an election for who should replace him as the captain general of the expedition, and they decide on co-commanders, because what expedition can't be led by two people at the same time? The two co-commanders are Duarte Barbosa, who was actually Magellan's brother-in-law, and Juan Serrano, who was originally the captain of the Santiago. Now, Magellan had a personal servant aboard the Trinidad with him, and as part of the terms of his service, he was to be freed upon Magellan's death. But Barbosa and Serrano decided that they wanted to keep him around as their personal servant. So the servant was not too thrilled with that, and he worked with Magellan's friend, the king of the Philippines, to conspire against the two new leaders. And this leads to what's known as the May 1st massacre. So the Spaniards were invited to a feast hosted by the king. And at this feast, all the locals turned on them, killing both of the new leaders and 27 total men.
These guys aren't big
from the
on like
expedition.
fostering loyalty among their men, are they?
So the next man appointed to be the captain general of the expedition is named Juan Lopez Carvalho, and he consolidates the 115 remaining men onto the Trinidad and the Victoria, meanwhile emptying the Concepcion and burning it. They just didn't have enough men left to crew 3 separate ships. Carvalho was kind of a wild card. He actually,
of course,
led the crew into some pretty sketchy
I'd expect nothing less at this
practices,
point.
some piracy, things like that. So he's eventually replaced by a new captain general named Martin Menendez, and he appoints Juan Sebastian Elcano to be the captain of the Victoria. So this is where we start to see Juan Sebastian Elcano in a more premium leadership role. He's now the captain of one of the 2 ships that are left. The expedition finally arrives at the Moluccas, which are the Spice Islands, on November 8th, 1521. Here they establish a trading post, and they purchase massive quantities of cloves and spices.
How do they have the energy to establish a trading post at this point? Did they
I don't
build
know.
it?
I mean,
they just walk
guess-
on the land and put a flag in the ground?
I guess they recovered a little bit while in the Philippines and got enough supplies that they could continue on with their journey. But I feel like at this point, you're just over it and you're exhausted. It's been a rough, what are we at now, 2 years?
Jeez.
So they get all their spices and they set to return to Spain, planning to leave on December 15th, when suddenly the Trinidad springs a leak. It starts to take
Of
on
course it
water,
does.
which delays their return
This
journey.
would be
a
the
bit.
most frustrating movie to watch.
So they decide to split up. The Victoria is okay to sail, so they plan to head what's called east. And the Victoria is now commanded by Elcano. This ship will take off. The Trinidad will be repaired and then head what's considered west, which is back to the Americas. So the 2 ships are going different directions. Some of the crew didn't want to travel towards Africa through Asia because that land did not belong to the Spanish. They didn't want to get into a political dispute by sailing in water that didn't belong to them. And they felt that they would just sail back the way they came. They made it once, they can make it back. So it's kind of like a weird, I don't know, they split up thinking that they can make it back to their hometown for different reasons, but it's at this point they got there.
I can't believe there were
coming
men
for.
willing to redo that journey.
I mean, I don't know that they knew going the other way would have been any better.
I mean, that's fair.
And also, legal issues
Locals.
by doing that.
Could hit those
Well,
locals
yeah.
up on the way back.
So the Trinidad, we'll just wrap them up quickly. The Trinidad does attempt to go back via the Americas. Eventually, they get captured by Portuguese.
Oh, no.
And the Trinidad gets sunk in a storm while under the control of the Portuguese. And the sailors that were aboard the Trinidad are kept prisoner for a few years, and we will catch up with them later. The Victoria, meanwhile, heads towards Africa. They eventually round the Cape of Good Hope, which is the southern tip of Africa, on May 6th. And they stop at the Portuguese port at Cape Verde to gather more provisions on July 10th. At this point, they only had rice for rations.
Jesus.
20 crewmen had died of starvation. But once they land at Cape Verde, they were surprised to learn that the date was actually July 9th, because they had been keeping a calendar aboard the ship where they thought they marked every single day, and somehow they lost a day. So they thought it was July 10th. The Cape Verde actually said it was July 9th. I kind of wonder if that has, in our time, anything to do with like the international date line, because at this point they've pretty much made a 360-degree route
Yeah, that's true.
around the globe. They just haven't made it back to Spain yet.
Right.
So I wonder if that's maybe where their counter got off. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to figure that out in my head, but that's kind of where my brain went when I read that.
That's an interesting point.
As we said, this is a Portuguese port. They're Spanish sailors. They were not legally permitted to stop here. So they were actually arrested and 13 crewmen were detained. The ship was able to escape with its cargo, which included 26 tons of spices.
Dang.
for them to head back to Spain.
Do you have any idea like what the value of that would have been at that time?
So in trying to figure this out, I kind of got caught up in a bit of a rabbit hole. There's no good exchange rates from 1521 to 2021.
What?
So
what about the Bureau of Labor Statistics?
this isn't like a dollar figure, but the perceived scarcity and difficulty just in acquiring spices made them worth more than their weight in gold.
Wow.
But if you do want to figure out the money side of it, it's estimated that after deducting the cost of the 4 lost ships, the men, supplies, everything that went into the expedition, the 26 tons of spices returned from the expedition resulted in a net profit of about 500 gold ducats. So gold ducats at the time were a fairly standard trading coin, at least within Europe. It was pretty widely accepted. A gold ducat weighs about 0.11 ounces of gold. And if you look at the current gold price, it's about $1,744 per ounce, which makes one gold ducat today about $193. So doing some quick math right now, the net profit of this expedition being about 500 gold ducats makes it about $96,500 in today's money.
That's not a bad take, but it's also a lot of stuff to do for.
I mean, I'm amazed that this voyage was profitable. Like,
Yeah,
period.
well, that too.
Like,
They lost like most of their supplies, 3 of their ships, 4 of their ships, right?
to their knowledge at this point, it was only 3 ships, but yes, they do eventually lose 4
Most of their
ships.
most of their men, 1 captain.
I mean, it's incredible that it was worth it.
Yeah.
When you think about it, like the king, they comes back and it's a success because they collected enough spices to have made it worth it, even though they only brought 1 ship back. I don't know if I would have gone on this journey for $100,000, but heck,
I don't know.
it's 1521. What are you going to do with $100,000?
That's fair.
The ship arrives back in Spain at Sanlúcar on September 6th, 1522. Out of the original 270 crew members, only 18 of them remained aboard the Victoria.
Wow. So was that 270 just aboard the Victoria at the beginning, or total?
That was across all 5 ships.
Okay. So essentially, the entire expedition lost 250 people.
At least for the original returnees. The 13 who
Okay.
were detained at Cape Verde
Gotcha.
did eventually arrive back in Spain a few weeks later. And we mentioned the Trinidad got kind of held up by some Portuguese explorers. I think there were 5 men aboard the Trinidad at that point that were original members of the expedition who did eventually, long time later, make it back to Spain, which if you want to count them as people who were involved in circumnavigation, in total there were about 30 people who did circumnavigate the globe
Jeez.
in this expedition, captained and finished by Juan Sebastian Elcano. Following the expedition, Emperor Charles V recognized Juan Sebastian Elcano's achievement with an augmented coat of arms, which featured a globe and the Latin words Primus circumdedisti me, which translates to "You first encircled me." His family was given rule over a region in the Negros Island in the Philippines, and he actually continued on a future expedition, which was the Loaiza expedition. And this was an effort to claim the East Indies for Emperor Charles V.
They just can't get enough of this.
He wasn't the captain general of the expedition initially. Obviously, Loaiza would have been an explorer who captained the expedition. But after Loaiza died of either scurvy or malnutrition, Juan Sebastian Elcano was made the captain of this expedition, but he himself died at sea only a few days later from the same causes.
It doesn't seem to be like a great life to be a ship captain at this time.
I mean, it's a life choice. Like, you never
That's fair.
really are home. Like, that's just kind of the career you choose for yourself. Elcano never married, but he did father a son and a daughter with 2 separate women. His son, Domingo Elcano, was recognized in his last will and testament, so he was legitimized in the end. Now, Elcano's accomplishment is often overshadowed by Magellan. We obviously know that. We weren't really taught about Juan Sebastian Elcano in school, but we certainly knew about Magellan. But it's kind of funny because Magellan didn't complete the voyage. While he did organize and petition for this expedition to take place, and he commanded the majority of it, Magellan never intended on circumnavigating the globe. The plan was to sail to the East Indies, collect the spices, and sail back the same route that he took to get there, Remember, he was trying to find a
better
trade
route.
route via the west, which was through the Americas, so he wasn't supposed to go all the way around through the Portuguese trade routes.
So he died not knowing he would be considered the first man to circumnavigate the globe.
Exactly.
All right.
In its history, Spain itself has not really publicly recognized Elcano for fear of this kind of Basque nationalism uprising and causing some problems by celebrating Elcano as a hero. That's changed a little bit in more recent years, but from the completion of this circumnavigation on, Elcano's just kind of been forgotten throughout history because Spain didn't celebrate him as this national hero.
So they were afraid of them uprising in celebration of him? Or
It more would almost legitimize the Basque nation, if that makes sense.
interesting.
So it would have given the Basque claim to their lands as to why they should be independent from Spain. They should have their own sort of autonomy. And Spain wasn't really ready to give up this land that they had taken on as part of their own country.
Weird. Huh.
So it, in effect, it caused a lot of Spaniards at the time to give credit to Magellan for this expedition over Elcano, who actually completed it and brought the spices back to Spain.
So in layman's terms, they didn't want to give them the confidence of having a national hero, essentially.
Essentially, yes. And
Okay.
the Basques themselves never really celebrated Elcano in the way that he probably properly deserved.
Sure.
And I wonder if that has something to do with the fact that he didn't really stay home after his expedition. Like, he went on future expeditions and
Yeah.
eventually died at sea. So he really wasn't like this come home, become a local hero or a political figure or anything like that. He continued on as a sea merchant because that's what he did for his career and for his life. There's some differing opinions about who deserves the credit. I found quotes from Carmen Iglesias, who is the president of Spain's Royal Academy of History, who says, quote, "The focus has always been on Magellan, but everyone should know that this was the project of a Spanish king, financed with Spanish money, and completed by a great Spanish navigator whose role has unfortunately been forgotten." On the contrary, a Portuguese historian by the name of João Paulo Oliveira e Costa says, quote, "There is a continuation from Magellan to Elcano, but with the understanding that the deeds of Magellan came from his own will, while Elcano finished a job that he did not start. Elcano achieved a record, but Magellan changed the knowledge of geography. That is why, since those times, Magellan got more recognition."
I mean, the latter sounds kind of like philosophical, I don't know, arguing over semantics, arguing over philosophical semantics, like whether or not Magellan intended to finish the job or Elcano intended to start the job.
Intent versus action.
Yeah.
In modern times, Elcano has finally started to get some of the credit that he probably deserves. In preparation for the 500th anniversary of the expedition, which we are actually currently within still, because we're within that 3-year period.
It's a 3-year anniversary.
It is. Portugal submitted a UNESCO proposal of a World Heritage Site for the, quote, Route of Magellan. Now, this proposal was replaced in 2019 by a joint proposal with Portugal and Spain for the route of the Magellan-Elcano circumnavigation. And today, Spain's Navy actually has a training ship named for Juan Sebastian Elcano.
I mean, it's I suppose a fair... I don't know if it's as fair as he deserves, but at least they finally are coming around to...
Yeah, he's starting to get a little bit of recognition. He's obviously not someone that we were taught in our history books as a child.
For sure.
You hear that and you think as a kid, yeah, Magellan was the first guy to sail all the way around the world. But number one, he didn't. And number two, if he had survived, he wouldn't have.
That's
because he would have
true.
gone back the other
I didn't
way.
even think about that. Like, if he'd stayed alive, he wouldn't have been.
Yeah.
So he is that guy because he died, basically.
Yeah, kind of, in a way. Because of Juan Sebastian
Yeah.
Elcano, who decided to go the way he wasn't supposed to and eventually make it back to Spain.
So interesting. It's like, I don't even know where I land. Like, I kind of get that Elcano didn't start the journey with those intentions, or at least lead the journey. We'll say that.
I think it's fair to give Magellan sufficient credit for creating the idea of the expedition,
Yeah.
petitioning to make it happen, and leading them as far as he got. But if we're talking about circumnavigation, I think the credit belongs to Elcano because he's the one who did complete the journey back up to Spain,
Yeah.
which might not have happened with someone else commanding that last ship.
Interesting. Well, are you ready for your quiz?
We'll see. I don't really know what to expect for this one.
All right. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Megan,
And I'm Taylor.
and we're the hosts of Fancy Town Crimes.
Two best friends that cover the horrible. He's doing that like horror movie crawl that people do, when they like crawl.
No.
Yeah, like super creepy.
And sometimes silly crimes that happen in wealthy towns.
He was naked with a mask and a tube sock. Reality has left the building. Don't let us fool you though. We're middle class broads poking fun at the rich.
So join us for some laughs and gasps as we unpack the crimes of the upper crust.
Check out our antics on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
When we decided to make a podcast, the first thing we did was download Anchor.
Because we have no money, and Anchor is free.
You can also record and edit your podcast right from your phone or a computer.
Then, it only takes one click to share your podcast to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more.
And because we have no money, Anchor helps pair us with advertisers and lets our listeners support the History's B-Side podcast directly on our page.
If you've got an idea for your own podcast, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. All right, welcome back. So we like to end every episode with a short quiz for our host, just to see how much we've learned in our research and also to give our listeners a fun chance to see what they know or have learned over the course of the episode. So today's quiz is going to be all about the age of exploration, specifically Magellan / Elcano's voyage.
Okay. I only really studied this one expedition, so...
That's okay. I feel like one of the questions is pretty easy. A second is multiple choice. And a third has a lot of inferral. I feel like you'll be all right.
All right, we'll see how it goes.
We'll start with the easy one, just a warm up.
Great.
So, in the course of their voyage, you mentioned that the Magellan expedition crosses through a strait that is now known as the Strait of Magellan. What modern day country is the Strait of Magellan in?
Chile?
Correct.
Woot.
See, not that bad.
I
It's
don't
really
know.
50-50. It's Argentina or Chile, right?
I was kind of wondering if maybe like at the southern point it turns into a different country or something.
No. So now for your multiple choice. One of the ships in Magellan's initial expedition and the one that Elcano ended up sailing the rest of the way around the world on was the Victoria. Approximately how many miles did the Victoria sail during the entire expedition?
I read this, but it wasn't measured in miles. It was measured in... What's the term?
Kilometers?
No, it's a nautical term.
Oh. Leagues.
Leagues. That's what it was.
Well, it's the multiple choice one, so
Oh, okay.
1 out of 4. 20,000 miles, 42,000 miles, 85,000 miles, or 120,000 miles.
Oh, those are very like spread out answers.
I didn't want to make it too difficult.
Let's go option D or C. What was that? 82,000?
85.
85,000?
It was 42.
Ah, darn it.
Close-ish.
Not really. I can't even visualize that.
I can't even. I don't know why multiple choice would help you because
Yeah.
above like 5,000 miles, I have no idea.
I don't even know what's the length around the Earth.
I mean,
Obviously, they went further
the
than that.
drive from
technically,
Portland to here that we mentioned earlier is 2,500 ish. So, like, I don't even know how to
20
fathom.
times that, basically.
Yeah. And so, for your third and final question, this entire thing, the entire point of this voyage was to find a better route for the spice trade. Can you name the 3 primary uses for the spices in the 1500s and 1600s in Europe?
I know the main thing was essentially masking the flavor of spoiled meat because they didn't really have preservatives. I have to guess one of the uses is tea. I don't know the third. Maybe something to do with burial.
That's a good guess.
Ah.
But no. So you kind of touched on two of these. One was as a preservative, and another was to mask bad flavors in food. The last was for use for their health benefits in medicines and herbs.
Oh, okay.
Which I guess tea could
Fall into that. Maybe.
Good job.
Thank you. That wasn't bad.
No, I told you it wasn't going to be terrible. I couldn't find anything on Elcano that we didn't already talk about. But
There wasn't much else on Elcano, and listen, I hope I got things historically accurate. With some of these older ones, it's really hard to tell.
that's always good to hear at the end of a history podcast.
No,
we hope we were right.
I think it was fairly accurate.
No, I'm just kidding.
And we do strive for that, obviously, but
Yeah.
like I think we get so caught up in history in the 18th, 19th, 20th centuries that it's like it's hard to go back further.
Yeah.
Because there's just not that much research on it, or like very, very accurate information. Like when we did, what was it? Cleisthenes, which was 500 BC. Like that wasn't about Cleisthenes' background. That was about a government structure that he set up. So for
Right.
us to find biographical information is difficult, but it's really interesting, I think, to
Yeah.
learn about. I was saying that I feel like I didn't know that much about Magellan's trip until I read his voyage expedition, until I read this in hopes of finding things about Elcano, and I really learned a
Right.
lot more about the voyage itself.
I don't know that I would have been able to say who the first man to circumnavigate the globe was, frankly. Like,
Why are you hosting a history podcast?
to learn about history. I definitely wouldn't have been able to tell you exactly what his route was.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely a lot to learn in this episode. Might be one of our longer ones, but thanks for tuning in and learning a little bit about someone you probably haven't heard of before.
We'll see you next week. History's B-Side is an independent, listener-supported podcast.
Leave us a review or subscribe to the show on your favorite podcasting service, and follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at History's B-Side.
Send us your feedback or inquire about sponsorship and advertising opportunities by emailing us at historiesbside@gmail.com.
You can donate to the show at buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside. While you're there, check out our membership perks, merchandise, and more.
This episode was researched and produced by your hosts, Matt Melito
And Phil Hall. Thanks for listening to History's B-Side.